Hey everybody, welcome to the Leek. I'm John as always, and it's that time of year again. It's set review time. Rivals of Ixalan will be here next weekend, and we just got all the cards spoiled today, so we're going to take a look at every single card in the set, starting with the white cards today. Now, of course, there are three quick disclaimers here. Disclaimer number one, the most important, this is a limited set review. We're going to be talking primarily about draft, and most of it's going to be applicable for sealed. I'll make comments about sealed, etc., because that's what we'll all be playing next weekend. This is not about standard or legacy or vintage or commander or anything like that. If I say that a card is terrible, that doesn't mean that it's actually fantastic in legacy or standard or in your EDH deck. I'm just saying it's terrible in limited, so keep that in mind. Number two, I've not played with these cards yet, although there are some cards coming back from previous sets, including the last set we just had, Ixalan. But generally, I've not played with these cards yet. I've not played the format. So these are my first approaches to these cards. These are how I will be picking and playing these cards in the next few weeks until I get more experience with them. My ratings will change. That's why I do a top 10 cards I was wrong about at the end of each season. That's why I do weekly draft videos so that I can continue to refine. But these are how I'm going to approach these cards from the start. These are how I recommend you start approaching these cards from the start. Finally, of course, these are just my opinions on these cards. I may rate cards more differently than you do. I may disagree. I might miss something. I may miss an actual amazing case for this card. And that's why I do these set reviews, not to tell you what is correct, but to encourage discussion amongst me and you, amongst yourselves, etc. So use the comments below. Let me know what you agree with, what you disagree with. Chat with me, chat with everybody else down there. And yeah, let's talk about this set and figure out how good these cards are going to be. Up first, we have Baffling End. Baffling End is 1 and a white for an enchantment at uncommon. When Baffling End enters the battlefield, exile target creature an opponent controls with converted mana cost 3 or less. When Baffling End leaves the battlefield, target opponent creates a 3/3 green dinosaur creature with trample. There isn't that much enchantment hate in the format, and you're basically guaranteed to not see it game 1 anyways. So this is basically Reeve Soul in white in a lot of cases. It'll kill a creature power 3 or less. A solid pickup, first pickable in a weak pack, but the conditional aspect of it makes it not super strong. Useful for sure, but you know, it is just killing a little thing. The time that your opponent does get a dinosaur back from this will suck, but I just don't see that happening very much. I think this is a fine B-, but what even is the flavor here? Why is there a smoking shadow of a vampire? I don't get the art at all. There's like a dinosaur head. I guess this is its neck, but I don't understand. I don't understand this art. Somebody explain. Somebody explain to me what's happening here, please. Up next is Bishop of Binding. Bishop of Binding is 3 and a white for a creature vampire cleric at rare. It's a 1/1. When Bishop of Binding enters the battlefield, exile target creature an opponent controls until Bishop of Binding leaves the battlefield. Whenever Bishop of Binding attacks, target vampire gets +X until end of turn, where X is the power of the exiled card. So this is, you know, your typical Banisher Priest type effect. It is a 1/1. Which is weak. It dies to basically every single piece of burn around. The attack clause is cute, but you're really only ever targeting itself, because attacking with a 1/1 that will give an opponent a creature is pretty silly. Still, Oberyn creatures are fine, even if they are 1/1s. You just have to hold them back a lot of the time, unless you did exile like a 6/6 and it attacks as though it's a 7/7. And, you know, there will be those cases where this does attack decently. Ultimately, I'm going to go with like a B+ on it, I think. It is just a Banisher Priest, as weak as it may be. Kind of depends on just how commonly people are playing things that deal 1 point of damage. The more likely that people are playing, you know, dual shots and things like that, the lower this goes, especially since they can just respond to it, you know, when you declare attackers, so it is going to be a 1/1 for a good deal of the time. So B+ might honestly be slightly high, but I don't want to ever underrate a Banisher Priest. So I will start with a B+ on Bishop of Binding. Blazing Hope is up next. Blazing Hope is a single white mana for an instant at uncommon. Exile target creature with power greater than or equal to your life total. It's 1 mana, that's cool, I guess, but it is a dead card, a good, like, I don't know, 90% of the time. Just count me out of this. I'm not playing this ever. It's a card that's basically only ever good when you're real behind, like literally about to die. And I don't ever want to be playing a card that's only good and possibly only playable in that situation. So I'm at an F on Blazing Hope. I think it's just flat out awful. Maybe we can go with like a D- because you should side it in if your opponent has like a 12-12 or something, but that's just not going to happen enough for me to, you know, give this anything higher. Cleansing Ray is up next. Cleansing Ray is 1 and a white for a sorcery at common. Choose one. Destroy target vampire or destroy target enchantment. You know, both of these are sideboard cards, and super narrow sideboard cards at that. So this card still is not main deckable. If you see vampires, you do have yourself a Doomblade sitting there in your sideboard, though, and it's going to be fantastic to side in. If you see enchantments that you really want to get rid of, I guess you have a Disenchant. Never mainboard this, but, you know, pick it up when you're out of picks, and when you see those vampires, side this in, and you just found yourself some fantastic removal. So D+ for Cleansing Ray. Divine Verdict is back. Divine Verdict is 3 and a white for an instant at common. Destroy target attacking or blocking creature. We last saw this, I believe, in a core set a few years ago, and it's just a fine card. Creatures will attack and block, and this will kill them. It's not a first pickable card, but it is a pretty high mid-pack, and you'll always play 1 or 2 of them. Kind of functions like a really high C+. B-, it feels a little bit too generous for it, but it is a very high C+. Divine Verdict solid. You'll never not play the first copy, and maybe even the second one. Everdawn Champion is up next. Everdawn Champion is 1 white for a creature human soldier at uncommon. She's a 2/2. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to Everdawn Champion. So she's a 2/2 sort of indestructible, at least in combat anyways. That's fine, I guess, but it's not really enough to raise this above a C+. You'll play it, but it is relatively mid-packish. It pretty quickly does just become a wall, which isn't what most white decks want. You're going to have to pump this up with, you know, auras and counters and stuff to make this continue attacking, at which point you're just begging for some sort of removal to hit this thing. So I wouldn't go any higher than a C+. I wouldn't spend too many, you know, super real picks on it. I'd play it. I'd play it every single time I have it, but it's going to be in the mid-pack. Exultant Skymarcher is up next. Exultant Skymarcher is 1 white for a creature vampire soldier at common. It's a 2/3 with flying. And that's it. It's a vanilla 2/3 flyer for 3. It's fine. You'll play it in sealed a little bit more often, and you'll play it in draft when you need a creature and you don't have another one. It's a middle-of-the-road C. You're not going to feel bad for playing it. You're also not going to feel great for playing it. Just a C. Famished Paladin is up next. Famished Paladin is 1 and a white for a creature vampire knight at uncommon. It's a 3/3 for 2. It's like a super bear. But Famished Paladin does not untap during your untap step. Whenever you gain life, untap Famished Paladin. You know, a 3/3 for 2 is obviously really good. That's far better than a bear, which is something we always are okay with. But not untapping until you gain life does sound very rough. Obviously, in a good vampire deck, you're hopefully gaining life at least semi-regularly, but I do worry about a vanilla 3/3 that semi-regularly untaps. I think this is a super deck-dependent choice, and a lot of decks, even some vampire decks, simply won't want to run this. I'm going to start this at a low C. I'm not going to go as low as C- yet, but I'm going to have it as a C, a relatively late pick that does go up when you have a huge amount of life gain, a huge amount of, you know, 1/1 vampire tokens, things like that. Sure, you could throw on a Mark of the Vampire or something that gives this lifelink, but at that point I start to feel a little bit risky about going all in on one creature. But yeah, I think if you build around it, this can be a high C+, but I'm going to start it at a low C. Up next is the start of a cycle, Forerunner of the Legion. There's one of these for each tribe. Forerunner of the Legion is 2 and a white for a creature vampire knight at uncommon. It's 2/2. When Forerunner of the Legion enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a vampire card, reveal it, then shuffle your library and put that card on top of it. Whenever another vampire enters the battlefield under your control, target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So all these Forerunners go and tutor up a creature of their type, and then they each have an ability that happens whenever you cast a creature of that type. So Legion Conquistador lets you draw the cards. If we're going to compare this to a card that we've super recently played with, putting them on top is not quite as good, but you do get to find your absolute best vampire. You're not just going and finding a conquistador, I hope, or at least the best vampire for the situation. Getting the +1/+1 is nice, but it's not really making me super excited or anything. I don't know. I think this entirely ends up on just how good and how many vampires are in your deck. I'll have to play with these Forerunners to really know for sure, but my assumption is that they're totally fine. You'll always play them, but they won't be high picks until you're in that deck. You don't say, ooh, a Forerunner, I'm going to go vampires. You say, ooh, I've got some vampires. Hey, there's a Forerunner. So let's go with a C+ on Forerunner. The grades for these Forerunners do bounce around a little bit, but not too much. So C+ for the vampire one. Up next is Imperial Ceratops. Imperial Ceratops is 4 and a white for a creature dinosaur at uncommon. It's a 3/5. It has Enrage. Whenever Imperial Ceratops is dealt damage, you gain 2 life. A 3/5 for 5 is just not very playable, and gaining 2 when it takes damage isn't going to do too much. You can dream about your opponent pointlessly attacking into it, but they're just not going to attack in that situation. I'd cut this relatively often, maybe side it in if you're going to go late game, but it's a 5-drop. You're already getting towards the late game by the time this even comes down. So I'm not sold on Imperial Ceratops. I think it's a C-. I do not think you play this terribly often. C+ for Imperial Ceratops. Up next is Legion Conquistador. Legion Conquistador is 2 and a white for a creature vampire soldier at common. It's a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for any number of cards named Legion Conquistador, reveal them, put them into your library, or put them into your hand, then shuffle your library. We just saw this guy in Ixalan. Look who's back. Back again. Conquistador's back. Tell a friend. Just like before, it's a C to a low C+ if you get multiples, and it's a C- if you only have one. Go back a few months to hear more. This is exactly the same card from Ixalan, and I'm going to say exactly the same about it. So, C. Up next is Luminous Bonds. Luminous Bonds is 2 and a white for an enchantment aura at common. Enchant creature. Enchanted creature can't attack or block. This is pacifism for 1 more for some reason. I'm not sure why. But even costing 1 more, it doesn't make a real difference. It's still pacifism. It's still premium removal that you should take quite highly, maybe even first pick in many packs. You won't take this over like a game-ending bomb, but you'll take it next. A-, Luminous Bonds is great. I don't quite understand why it had to cost 3 instead of just being pacifism, but sure, whatever. Still an A- for Luminous Bonds. Up next is Majestic Heliopterus. Majestic Heliopterus is 3 and a white for a creature dinosaur at uncommon. It's a 2/2 flyer. Whenever Majestic Heliopterus attacks, another target dinosaur you control gains flying until end of turn. Seems pretty darn good in a dinosaur deck. 2/2 flyer for 4 is relatively normal. You know, we'd sometimes play that regardless. It would be fillerish level, but we'd play it. And giving a dinosaur flying, especially late game, could just be game over. You know, give a 12/12 flying. Whoops, I win. You'll play these always as long as you have a handful of dinosaurs, and honestly, as I said, you'd play it as filler in any white deck, even if you've only got like 1 or 2 other dinosaurs. Easy C+ in my mind. B- feels slightly too generous. I'm going to keep it at a C+. I almost went up to a B- there. You're going to take this, mid-pack, pretty high mid-pack, so C+ for Majestic Heliopterus. Up next is Martyr of Dusk. 1 and a white for a creature vampire soldier at common. It's a 2/1. When Martyr of Dusk dies, create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. You know me, I like my 3/1s for 2 in white. I prefer 2/1s for 1 in white, but this one does give me a 1/1 vampire token when it dies, so I think I'm fairly okay with this. I think this will be somewhat of a workhorse in a low aggressive white weenies type deck. I really wish it was a 3/1 for 2, but I don't think we could get the creature token if it actually cost 2 mana and was a 3/1. So I will keep this at a C. I do not think you go out of your way to get this. I don't think it quite crosses up into the C+ territory. It gets a little bit close, but I'm going to keep it at a C. It is just kind of, it's fine. You will not feel bad for playing this. You might even feel slightly good, and you'll never feel bad about cutting it either. Moment of Triumph is up next. Moment of Triumph is a single white mana for an instant at common. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. You gain 2 life. Now, Vampire Zeal was always decent, even when you weren't casting it on a vampire and getting first strike. Getting some extra value regardless of what you hit just sounds fine to me. It's a totally normal C combat trick. You play it when you can, you don't feel bad when you have to cut it, and it's going to do some serious work. So solid C for Moment of Triumph. Use it exactly the same as Vampire's Zeal. Slightly less good in the Vampire's deck, but still just as decent as any old +2/+2 combat trick. Next up is Paladin of Atonement. Paladin of Atonement is 1 and a white for a creature vampire knight at rare. It's a 1/1. At the beginning of each upkeep, if you lost life last turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Paladin of Atonement. When Paladin of Atonement dies, you gain life equal to its toughness. It's a 1/1 for 2, which of course is virtually unplayable. After taking some damage, getting a 2/2 makes this, I guess, a bear with an upside. This only really gets good after it becomes a 3/3, I'd say. That being said, a card that makes racing a somewhat bad idea for your opponent does have some real solid utility. You can attack with your ever-increasing Paladin, which eventually, if they do kill it, just makes the race even worse as you gain a bunch of life. I'm going to have to play with this to see how good it is. I don't think it's going to be exactly first pickable in a lot of packs. I think it's kind of at the B- level. I think it's going to be good. I think there's going to be more than enough situations where this does get to be 2/2, 3/3, 4/4, and eventually gain you some life when they do finally have to kill it, or else face down an ever-increasing thing. So I think it is good. I think it just kind of misses the bomb status. I think it just kind of misses being better than removal. So I am going to put it at about a B-, I think. Pride of Conquerors is up next. Pride of Conquerors is 1 and a white for an instant at uncommon. It has Ascend, which is the only new mechanic for this set. Ascend says, if you control 10 or more permanents, you get the City's Blessing for the rest of the game. The City's Blessing is just a token, sort of. It's like an emblem. It's like a Planeswalker emblem. You just get it. And when you have it, you always have it. On the instants and sorceries, it checks when you cast it. When it resolves. So when Ascend resolves, it says, hey, do you have 10 permanents? That counts lands, that counts tokens, etc. If you do, you get the City's Blessing, you have it forever. If it's on a permanent, which we'll see on the next card actually, it is always checking. So it's always checking to see if you have 10 permanents. As soon as you get your 10th permanent, you get the City's Blessing. Anyways, Pride of Conquerors has Ascend. Creatures you control gets +1/+1 until end of turn. If you have the City's Blessing, those creatures get +2/+2. Until end of turn instead. So having the City's Blessing powers up spells, basically. So +1/+1 for 2 isn't the best, not without something untapping or something cool like that, kind of like Rallying Roar in Ixalan. But it can end games with white weenies. If you go wide and you go, oops, +1/+1, suddenly I win where I'm doing twice as much damage as you thought I was going to. And of course, if you are white weenies, you're probably wide enough that you're gonna get the City's Blessing when you cast this, or you already have it, in which case giving +2/+2 makes this much closer or even slightly better than a Trumpet Blast, because your creatures are a little bit more likely to survive. But hopefully you are using this card and cards like this to just end the game. Don't use these cards to get in a bit of extra damage unless you have a clear path to victory in the following turn. If you're in white weenies, you'll be happy enough to have this, and it's going to be like a C+. You're not going to use a super real pick on this. It's going to be mid-pack, late mid-pack, but you're going to be happy with it if you are in that go-wide deck. If you are not, if you're in, a bigger dinosaur deck, a ramp deck, things like that, this drops straight down to like a D. You just don't play it in those cases. So know when to play this and pick it late regardless. Sort of a D to a C+, depending on the deck. Radiant Destiny is up next. Radiant Destiny is 2 and a white for an enchantment at rare. It has Ascend, so this is one of the permanents. So remember, Ascend is always checking if it's on a permanent. So as soon as you get those 10 permanents, you get the blessing. As Radiant Destiny enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1. As long as you have the City's Blessing, they also have Vigilance. Assuming you're really tribal, which you're in Ixalan, you generally should be, a 3-mana Anthem is an insta-bomb, basically. Like, you stand a very good chance at winning that game from there on out. It gets worse the less tribal you are, though, so make sure that you do have a whole bunch of dinosaurs or vampires, or you could even name human, depending on the makeup of your deck. The City's Blessing thing is cool and all, and it'll help you if you end up in a defensive spot, but it is the weakest ability that this could be given. All in all, though, a 3-mana Anthem for hopefully a huge part of your deck is just a B+. I'll first pick this and say, hey, going deep on tribal, so B+ for Radiant Destiny. Back again, unfortunately I already did the M&M reference, is Raptor Companion. It's 1 and a white for a 3/1 creature dinosaur at common, just like it was in Ixalan. It's good. I like this. I like 3/1s for 2. We've talked about this. We talked about this last set review. This is, it's a high C. As much as I love them, I can't go to a C+ on this, but it is a high C. You'll play them, if you have them, and if you have to cut one, you're not going to feel horrible. But, yeah, it's Raptor Companion. It's still a C. Up next is Sanguine Glorifier, 3 and a white for a creature vampire cleric at common. It's a 3/3 Sanguine Glorifier enters the battlefield. Put a +1/+1 counter on another target vampire you control. Yes, this is just Jade Guardian in vampire form without hexproof. I don't like this. I really don't like this. This is a merfolk card. Merfolks are the ones that, deal with +1/+1 counters and giving +1/+1 counters to, the creature of its type. I don't like that this card exists from a design perspective. Anyways, it's a fine playable card. It helps with the lifelink vampires running around. You can throw this on a vampire token, and now you got a 2/2 lifelinker. Throw it on your other creatures, whatever. It's all around a solid C+, just like Jade Guardian was. Well, Jade Guardian was possibly even slightly better than that. But yeah, I hate that this card exists from a design perspective, and from a play perspective, it's totally fine. It's a C+. On to another vampire, we've got Skymarcher Aspirant up next. Skymarcher Aspirant is a single white mana for a creature vampire soldier at uncommon. She's a 2/1. She has Ascend. Skymarcher Aspirant has Flying, as long as you have the City's Blessing. So she's a 2/1 for 1. I like 2/1s for 1. 2/1s for 1 are 100% playable unless you are, just the most grindy defensive late game deck ever, which white is not commonly doing. If you don't just instantly overwhelm them in the first few turns, 2/1s for 1 do tend to kind of crap out a little bit. So the fact that when you get the City's Blessing, it becomes a 2/1 flyer, which can potentially continue getting damage through, is really nice. I love this card, a ton. And I'll pick this pretty highly, probably higher than I should, obviously after bombs, after removal, etc. But I'm looking at this real high mid-pack, real high mid-pack. I've got this at a B-. I love 3/1s for 2. I love 2/1s for 1, and 2/1s for 1 that eventually fly. Super sold. B- for Skymarcher Aspirant. Up next is Slaughter the Strong. Slaughter the Strong is 1 white for a sorcery at rare. Each player chooses any number of creatures he or she controls with total power 4 or less, then sacrifices all other creatures he or she controls. So Wraths are always worse than limited, just because it's not really feasible for you to sandbag for too long and take a whole bunch of damage, whereas in Constructed, as long as control is supported, which it hasn't been for a while in Standard, you can counter some things, let some things happen, etc. Then Wrath. A Wrath that allows your opponent to pick their best creatures, or the best creatures that they can that have total power 4 or less, knowing what you have on board, isn't the best. But that being said, of course, you get the first chance to drop a big thing with the knowledge that you were going to Slaughter the Strong. So you can Slaughter the Strong and then play your 6/6 or 7/7 or whatever. I think as long as you play this properly, play around this, don't throw out your 6/6 and then, draw that Slaughter the Strong that you have in your deck and have a dead card. But yeah, otherwise, this is just my usual limited Wrath discussion of it's not as good as you think it is. Don't compare it to Wraths in Constructed, but it is still fine as long as you play around it properly. So B-. Know that it's in the format as well. If you're up against white, maybe don't overextend yourself too much, but it's also not best to play around rares. Assuming an opponent has a rare, that's going to lose you a lot of games. So don't be overly cautious, but do think about it. I doubt I'd ever first pick this against real removal, even though it might be spot removal or some super strong creature, but it is fine enough, so I'm going to have it at a B-. You just do need to play with it carefully. Snubhorn Sentry is up next. Snubhorn Sentry is a single white mana for a creature dinosaur at common. It's an 0/3. It has Ascend. Snubhorn Sentry gets +3/+0 as long as you have the City's Blessing. An 0/3 for 1 is not really what I want. That's a far cry from an 0/4. 0/4s block for days. 03s block for a day. I don't know, maybe like 36 hours. Someday becoming a 3/4, well, if it really quickly gets there, cool, great. You know, if I'm white weenies and I somehow get City's Blessing on like turn 4, and I've got a 3/4 on turn 4, that's probably going to be decent for a couple of turns. But if it's turn 5 or 6 or later, I'm just not really into it. This looks like a very late pick to me, and I think you should regularly cut it. If you are a super go-wide deck, this probably does go up in value because it's a 1-drop. It gives you something to do on turn 1 that you might not otherwise be doing something on, but otherwise you should cut it. So I'm starting it at a C-. Up next is Sphinx's Decree. Sphinx's Decree is 1 and a white for a sorcery at rare. Each opponent can't cast instant or sorcery spells during that player's next turn. Ugh. This is bad. This is a rare that you're just going to cry over when you open it. Your rare slot was just wasted. This is like a fog, but somehow even worse. You maybe get some value out of this if your opponent was planning on casting a sorcery next turn. If they were planning on casting an instant next turn, they could just play it on your turn. So you bought yourself half a turn. But that's it. It's not enough. It doesn't do anything. It's an F-. You should never pick this. You should never ever play this. It is bad. F- for Sphinx's Decree. Squire's Devotion is up next. Squire's Devotion is 2 and a white for an enchantment aura at common enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has lifelink. When Squire's Devotion enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. This has the possibility of being decent. It is virtually a cheap Mark of the Vampire because you do get +2/+2 in lifelink. It's just split up between the enchanted creature and the token. 3 mana is cheap enough. Getting the 1/1 lifelink has some value, and getting +1/+1 and lifelink could be good. I'm going to start playing this a little bit highly to find out, starting it at around a C+. It really reminds me of Knightly Valor. It's nowhere near as good as Knightly Valor. +2/+2 plus a Vigilant Knight is pretty good. +1/+1 plus a lifelinking vampire. It's less good. I'm going to start it around a high C+. It might turn out to be B-ish. I also wouldn't be shocked if it turns out to actually be more like a C or a C-. Could just be a bad aura. We'll see. I'm going to start high on it with a high C+. Sun Sentinel is up next. Sun Sentinel is 1 and a white for a creature human soldier at common. It's a 2/2 with Vigilance because, of course, white doesn't get bears anymore. White only gets things that destroy the vanilla test. It's a Vigilant Bear. It's a C+. There's not much of a discussion here. It is a bear with an upside. There's nothing else going on here. You will pick this mid-pack, not too much higher than mid-pack. It's going to be fine. You're going to play probably just every copy you have of it. It's just fine. C+. Sun-crested pterodon is up next. Sun-crested pterodon is 4 and a white for a creature dinosaur at common. It's a 2/5 flyer. Sun-crested pterodon has vigilance as long as you control another dinosaur. A 2/5 for 5 flyer is not really my jam. That is way too defensive for me for a flyer. If I want a 2-powered flyer, I want a 2/1 for 2. Maybe a 2/2 for 4, as we talked about, although it had a really good upside. I don't think you're playing a 2/5 flyer for 5 and feeling happy. And I don't think you're playing this to block flyers and feeling happy. Maybe you side it in if your opponent has like a 4/4 flyer or something. Getting Vigilance is nice and all, but it's still just a 2/5 flyer for 5. I'm not in on this. I think it's a card that you play in sealed when you have no real choice in your creature selection, and I think it's a card that in draft you just really preferably don't play. So C-, cut this as much as possible, I think. Up next is Temple Altisaur. Temple Altisaur is 4 and a white for a creature dinosaur at rare. It's a 3/4. If a source would deal damage to another dinosaur you control, prevent all but one of that damage. This could be real annoying in a heavy dinosaur deck, but it is ultimately a much more defensive card. It doesn't do much better if your creatures already can attack profitably, and if they can't kill what your opponents have, then you're still not attacking. On the offense, it's only good if you're evenly matched in creature stats. You know, if you're 3/3 and they have a 3/3, you can attack in because their 3/3 hits like a 1/1. And that's just not typically where you want to be in Modern Magic. You don't want to build to be defensive, especially not with creatures. And I've seen no reason to really be going controlling in white with what I've seen so far. So while annoying, I'm not sure how playable / good this will be exactly. Were it a single mana cheaper, I think I'd feel pretty confident in saying this is just solidly good. At 5 mana, I have to drop it a little tiny bit. I'm going to start it at a B-. I think the annoying factor is going to be high enough for you to probably play this. I just don't quite think you first pick it. I don't know that dinosaurs really have an issue with dying to damage all that often. So Temple Altisaur, going to start you at a B-. If you're cool, if you're good, cool, great, I'm happy. And if you're not, well, then you can continue sitting at a B- or perhaps lower. Our second last card is our white mythic of the set. It is Trapjaw Tyrant. Trapjaw Tyrant is 3 white for a creature dinosaur at mythic. It's a 5/5. It has Enrage. Enrage, whenever Trapjaw Tyrant is dealt damage, exile target creature an opponent controls until Trapjaw Tyrant leaves the battlefield. This sounds great. And it's probably very, very, very good. I'm gonna talk bad about this card for a second, but I need to preface it by saying it is very, very, very good. But when you start to think about how this card actually plays out, it doesn't quite get to the level of great for me. I just feel like you're winning if your opponent's chumping a 5/5 anyways. And if they can, they'll definitely just take 5 damage in order to set up a double block to kill it next turn. Otherwise, how is this triggering? Your opponent's not going to randomly damage this just for the fun of it. You still should not be playing Ryle in your decks. And if you do manage to get a few things exiled with this, when your opponent does kill this guy, which is going to be their plan, they're going to forget about killing you and they're going to do everything they can to kill this. They get those creatures back. You know, this is not an enchantment where it's super hard to get rid of it. It is just a 5/5 creature. So, I don't know. Don't get me wrong. I'm on this being very, 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 very good, but I don't think I can push it into the great category. I think it's first pickable. I think it's 100% playable. I just, of course I dream about those situations where this has 5 creatures underneath it and my opponent is just losing creatures left and right, but I don't see that happening a ton. I've got it at a B+. It obviously attacks very well as a 5/5 for 5, but I do just think that it reads better than it is. And as I said, it is very, very, very good. I have it at a B+. I just think it sounds better than it actually is going to be. Our final card in white for Rivals of Ixalan is Zetalpa Primal Dawn. This is another cycle. Zetalpa Primal Dawn is 6 white for a legendary creature, Elder Dinosaur at rare. It's a 4/8. It has flying, it has double strike, it has vigilance, it has trample. It's also got indestructible. Oh boy. If you land this, you probably just win if you're not already just dead the next turn somehow. But landing an 8-drop is a tall ask. Maybe this is where the Temple Altisaur wants to be, to let you live long enough to drop this card. You play the Temple Altisaur, you play the Snubhorn, and you just say, oh my god, please let me get to 8 mana. Ultimately, I feel like this is just going to be way too expensive for way too many decks, despite how insane it is. Pick it at your own peril. Build the best ramp deck you ever built in your life. I will pick this exactly once the first time I see it to see if I can actually pull it off, and then I can see a world where I just never pick it again because it's way too expensive. It is a solid A when it's dropped. But boy, is it a lot lower when it's just sitting in your hand and you're just not getting to 8 mana before you're dead. So pick this card at your own peril. And as I said, build that just the best ramp deck you ever can, or you might just never see Zetalpa come down. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for the White Rivals of Ixalan set review. Tomorrow we'll be doing blue, Sunday we'll be doing black, Monday red, Tuesday green, and Wednesday the rest, gold, artifacts, lands, etc. As always, I want to hear what you think of these cards. Where do you agree with me? Where do you disagree with me? Chat with me in the comments. Chat with your fellow commenters down in the comments. Be respectful. Boy, I've never had to say that more than I have to this past month or two. But yeah, as always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can find me on Twitter at the Mana Leek. That's Leek, like the vegetable, not the card. You can also find me at facebook.com/Mana Leek, twitch.tv/Mana Leek, and patreon.com/Mana Leek if you want to become a backer there. If you like the content, click that thumbs up button, click subscribe if you want to see more, and if you do have questions, comments, or suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, I will see you all tomorrow.